if this whole technology, like all the quantum technologies, not only the computing side of things, they really have such a great impact as we hope they will, then it means we need to get a lot of people from different backgrounds on board as well.
Welcome to Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways, the podcast where we explore the exciting world of quantum careers. I'm Amir Rasool, your host, here to bring you inspiring stories from industry pioneers, researchers and innovators who are shaping the future. Whether you're a career changer, a curious mind, or an aspiring quantum professional, this is your gateway to discovering opportunities in this groundbreaking field. On this episode of Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways, I sat down with Dr. Jonas Kölzer, who's a physicist, entrepreneur and co-founder of Polarstern Education. We dug into how he went from building qubits in a lab to launching the School of Quantum, making complex ideas like superposition and entanglement accessible to everyone. We talked about hidden champions, the future of digital learning, and even how AI is changing the classroom. I thought it was a lively conversation about opening doors into quantum, so let's dive in. Hi, Jonas. Thanks for joining me today.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Obviously, we've spoken before, but the reason why I got you on board today is you'd recently launched the School of Quantum, which obviously is an educational media initiative created by Polaris. And I wanted you to talk about that because obviously Beyond the Bit Quantum Pathways is all about quantum education, etc. But before we get onto that, I just wanted to talk to you and learn a little bit more for myself and for the audience. So I suppose the first question is, what inspired you to pursue a career at the intersection of technology, engineering, and education?
Well, I mean, good question. I think it's a lot of questions, actually.
It is a lot of
So
questions.
maybe let me try to approach it from a chronological point of view. So
Perfect.
when I started to study, I went with physics. So I studied in Germany at the RWTH Aachen University. I did my bachelor's back there. And I remember there was this one lecture where we had a professor who just came from Harvard, and he talked about quantum computers and that he wanted to build a quantum computer in his lab. And I found that very exciting. So that kind of got me into the whole story or into the rabbit hole of quantum technology. So, and I guess we can talk about that also a little later. But that basically got me to stick with that topic. I also changed a little bit the groups, but then I ultimately went on to do a PhD in quantum physics, experimental condensed matter at the Jülich Forschungszentrum, which is, I think, Germany's biggest research center. And when I was finishing, I was like, what can I do next? So I wanted to also explore a little bit the outside world of academia. And since I had worked a lot in the clean room in the research center, because if you want to build quantum devices, you need to make very, very small structures. And the way that you do it is you need clean room instruments, like the same stuff basically that we are using to build the transistors in our phones and computers and so on. So I knew a little bit about that, like how the processes work and so on. So I thought, let's do something in this direction, but in industry. And back then, I think there was not so much quantum out there. Like there were a couple of companies, obviously, like the big ones like IBM, but at least here in Europe, there was not much. There were not so many startups, which at least I knew about as a PhD. So I decided to move into something that is, let's say, a little bit more classical, which is the classical semiconductor industry. And actually, I went to a company called Sensirion in Switzerland and basically worked there as a field application engineer. So I helped customers to integrate those chips, those sensors into all types of applications. And then later on, I also went into the field of AI, where like I got to learn more about edge AI and moved on to Accelera. But while all of this was happening, like already in my PhD, I kind of stumbled into the co-founding of a company in the education space. And that is what got me into education. So like my co-founders, they were already about to launch a company, and I was testing basically one of their earliest courses that they had made, which was like a massive open online course on venture capital investing. And then I gave them some feedback, and that's how I slipped into this. So that's how I came into the whole world of education. And that's where we are now with like the engineering side, the silicon side, the AI side, the education, and obviously also from an educational point of view, the quantum side of things.
And that's Polarstern Education, right?
Exactly. So that's the company.
So now you're kind of focusing on quantum education and digital learning.
Exactly. So back then, when the company was starting, the idea was to bring the universities from, let's say, the traditional way of educating with blackboards and big lecture halls, all the way towards what back then was called MOOCs, massive open online courses. So that's the time where like Stanford, Harvard, MIT, the big American universities, they decided we need to put out all of that course content. And actually, in fact, they already did it before some of the lectures, and maybe we also come to that later. But they would put out that content for free and then basically charge for the certificate. So that was like the business model back then. And big platforms like Coursera or
Mhm.
edX.org, they basically started at that time. And we were in Germany and we were looking at the universities and we saw that not a lot of universities were doing this. So our idea was initially to help the universities to become more digital. Turns out that also corporates are very interested in that and generally institutions, also governmental institutions. So that's kind of the idea. And the universities were a bit hesitant back then. But then
Mhm.
we all know the story. COVID hit and suddenly everything shut down. No big education events anymore, at least in person.
Mhm.
And everything became more digital. And that's like a little bit the story behind that as well.
So what's the landscape for quantum education like today? And how does the School of Quantum fit in?
Well, I mean, there is some stuff out there. I'm, of course, also always looking around, also trying to learn new things on other platforms. I think, and maybe we can also talk a little bit. Maybe I go a step back and I say
Sure.
what we think is the mission. So the mission of the School of Quantum is to make to democratize quantum education. So that's two parts: quantum education, which we basically describe as quantum technology. So not only computing, but also communication and sensing.
Mhm.
And then there's the democratization part, which partially includes that you put out stuff for free, like, for example, on platforms, social media. But it also includes that we need to make it an inclusive thing because there are people from many, many different backgrounds. And right now, most of the discussions that we have, they are all very much focused on the tech side of things because that's where it comes from. But
Mhm.
if this whole technology, like all the quantum technologies, not only the computing side of things, they really have such a great impact as we hope they will, then it means we need to get a lot of people from different backgrounds on board as well. Because if you start a company, you might need a lawyer who helps you with the IP, so they need to understand a little bit about it. If you want to make, I don't know, regulation on it, you need to get people from the regulation space on it. There's for sure a lot of opportunities to get people with a design background into it because they might have new ideas, either what to do with a quantum computer or how a quantum computer could look like. But
Mhm.
then there's also a lot of applications or potential applications, I'd rather say, because right now we are in this state where like first people are making first claims about what they can do better with a quantum computer. Um, but there's still some debate about that. But let's say there might be interest from a financial point of view, maybe from a pharmaceutical point of view, generally like molecular discovery. There could be AI as an application. There's a lot of interest from the logistics side of things. So also all of these companies, they might want to look into quantum computing and they need some access. There's
Mhm.
this whole story about basically collect now, so harvest now and decrypt later, right?
Yeah.
Where companies might have secret information which they are encrypting by classical encryption methods, and this being collected and later on maybe decrypted with a quantum computer. So if I'm now, let's say, a C-level executive in such a company, I need to basically understand where are the threats and how do I need to change my company. Where do I need to, what do I need to take care of, right? And there's like all these different aspects and directions, and we need to figure out how we can actually, yeah, include these people
Mhm.
into this whole revolution.
It's interesting you say that. I got a message from somebody the other day, and they said, "Look, I've got an idea in quantum. Do you know about patent lawyers?" And it wasn't something that I'd considered, but I was at a conference, the Economist conference earlier in the year, and I met somebody who was a patent lawyer. And I was like, this kind of confused me a little bit. And I was like, okay, what are you doing here? He goes, well, people who have these ideas don't necessarily know the logistics and what's needed, etc. And I was like, oh, very cool. As a result, I actually put these two people together. So I completely understand that, yeah, there are lots of more aspects to quantum computing and quantum computing companies. So that's fantastic. There's also a guy called Chris Bishop who sort of, in a weird way, a mentor of mine. He's got a book out called Improvising Careers, and he talks a lot about the different careers that are going to come as a result of the adoption of quantum computing. So I'll
Yeah,
get you a
he's a
copy of
great
that book.
person.
Have you met him?
I had a chance to talk to him, like I think once in a meeting,
Yeah,
and was super interesting. Like he has such a broad background and also such
yeah.
a good understanding, right, of the whole business. But yeah, I mean, I haven't read the book yet. Is it out already?
Say
Making a
again,
little
sorry.
bit of advertisement for him. Is it out already, his book?
Well, funnily enough, it's out already, and I've just finished it, and I'm interviewing him or having a podcast with him next week to talk about that book and what I've learned and what he's learned. Because yeah, it's fascinating.
Sounds good. Good
So
that I'm subscribed to this podcast then.
there you go. Okay, so back to sort of School of Quantum. Can you kind of walk us through how you design the quantum curriculum, and are there sort of topics that you are looking to make accessible? Obviously, you've got lots of things like entanglement, superposition, those kind of things.
So maybe first of all, I think like it's hard to say that, like, I think there's no such thing as the curriculum, right? Because people come from very different backgrounds. There are different approaches to it. I think what we are trying to do is very much like an experimentation approach where we think about ideas of how we can make it accessible. We throw it out there and see what people are doing with it. Like, for example, right now we have this series which we call the Hidden Champions, so Hidden Quantum Champions, where we
Yeah.
talk about on a daily, but like every couple of days there's a new episode being published. And basically I'm looking at companies from the quantum technology stack, so like all different types of technologies. I'm looking at their websites and I'm trying to learn a little bit more about what they are doing, what is their USP, what is the service that they provide. So this could, for example, be interesting for people that are looking for an orientation on the market. Could also be interesting for somebody who's looking to, I don't know, invest into companies and learn more about what is out there. So there's various different ideas, but then I'm just listening to what people are actually telling me. So some people say, look, there's this super interesting company that you were talking about, but some of the stuff that you explained, I didn't even understand because I'm lacking the terminology. So then,
Yeah.
okay, I'm learning, maybe I need to do something about this. Maybe I need to explain some of the more
Yeah.
basic stuff out there. But there's also other stuff. Right now, we are also working on formats to get people from specific industries to learn about, for example, quantum algorithms in a very project-based way.
Okay, so you're being kind of fluid and reactive in that respect, then.
Hmm.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
try
So
to.
it's a kind of A and B testing, if you will.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
maybe also because you mentioned superposition and entanglement. I mean, these are extremely fundamental, let's say, properties for
yeah,
quantum computers. So you need to understand those if you really want to understand what benefit a quantum computer could bring. So
yeah,
they are very fundamental in the theory of quantum physics. But I think it's, for example, also not necessary for everyone to
sure.
be able to understand them, because there's also other stuff which might play a role, or maybe they only need to understand part of it. If you, for example, work in medicine and you want to look at this SQUID, so superconducting quantum interference devices, they are like very tiny magnetic sensors for magnetic signals. And
Hmm.
they could be interesting to, for example, scan brain activities because they can resolve very small magnetic fields. And magnetic fields are always produced when electric currents are running. And you can let's say, very well resolve the location of these currents with these sensors. But for example, for them, you also need to understand the idea of flux quantization because it plays a role if you really want to understand the sensor at a core level. So yeah, there's different ideas in the
Yeah,
world of quantum. And I think every single approach has its own requirements for what to understand and to learn about. And the rest comes by itself from curiosity, I think.
yeah. So yeah, so obviously the hidden champions. I saw your latest one, which was on Rigetti computing. So you're kind of
Mhm.
doing a deep dive and explaining who they are, etc. Um, which is good because something that we talked about previously. If you're in the ecosystem, you hear about all of these companies, but it's like I've spoken to my friends. As soon as you get out of that ecosystem and you mention a company, people don't know. You know, we all
Mhm.
know because we're kind of embedded in it. But it's a great way to inform people about the companies out there and what they're doing and so on. For example, IonQ did some consolidation, bought some companies, and they were in the Times this week, which is a huge newspaper in the UK. So all of a sudden, a friend of mine was like, "Oh yeah, that's the company that you were talking about the other day." I was like, "Yes, completely."
Yeah, some people, yeah, I mean, some people they know about it because they invested at a good time when like nobody knew about it, and then it
Yeah,
came to the news and everyone started to look at it and money was kind of pouring in. So
yeah,
no investment advice at this point, right? But just yeah, that caught a lot of
exactly.
interest.
Yeah. So your target audience, would I be right in saying it's people who are really just curious about quantum and you're looking to give them a baseline education?
Yes, for sure. I mean, we try to be open to everyone in the sense of creating educational experience, but also working together with people on educational experiences. So there's also like this idea of making it project based.
Mhm.
So coming up together with a cool proposal for a project and then basically working on it. And I mean, today I cannot reveal too much. Maybe we do
Sure.
an episode in the future and I can talk a little bit more about it because I think there's some exciting stuff in the pipeline, which is coming in the next couple of months.
I'm sure there is. That's why I wanted to talk to you and get this message out there. I suppose I'll ask you questions. If you can't talk about it, we'll move on,
Sure.
which is fine. So obviously you're focusing on digitizing learning formats. I mean, what kind of challenges have you facing? How are you overcoming them?
Well, I mean, there's many challenges, of course, like curating it, making sure that it's interesting, also just getting this whole pipeline from, let's say, coming up with an idea all the way to putting it out there on different social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever. I think there's a whole lot of knowledge that goes into that. Actually, before we launched the School of Quantum, we put a couple of months of thoughts into that. We have like you always see me right now in front of the camera, but it's not, that doesn't mean that it's like just me doing this stuff. Actually, together with me, there's a team of very, very talented people. We have
Mhm.
like a musician that made the music for us. We have an AI artist that is creating, let's say, the models as well as the prompts that are generating all these visuals, for example, the thumbnails for YouTube, the backgrounds. So this is like something that is uniquely ours. And all of that stuff is happening with a team behind also that are like working on the social media posts and things like this, helping me to schedule that because there's actually a lot of work going into creating all of this on
Mhm.
such a high pace. So yes, I think there's a couple of challenges. And the good thing is, I mean, we are kind of used to this because this company, Polarstern Education, exists since 8 years now. So we've been
Okay.
helping 8 years long different institutions, companies, universities to actually bring their knowledge out to the world. And now we are basically for the first time taking this knowledge and doing it ourselves on our own content.
Oh, fantastic. So you mentioned universities there. Something I was thinking about is, are you, who are you collaborating with? Are there any standout collaborators or industry partners, corporations, startups that are helping you with this?
So there are a couple of people that we are talking to that we've already started to think about projects. So there's like universities that, for example, have ideas,
Mhm.
coming research grants, where they say it would be so great to actually take this knowledge and make it accessible, that it doesn't just stay in a couple of papers that are going
Yeah.
to very specialized journals or to archive, but actually to make it accessible to people out there in the world. And we've done that already in the past with, for example, an AI project, which where we really took like the PhD students, put them in front of the camera and made them talk about their research in a way that people can understand it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there are some things coming up. Of course, some of that just takes a little while
Of
until
course.
until you can really see something from the
Yeah.
outside.
Okay. And are you looking to use the School of Quantum to kind of prepare students for careers in emerging technologies in quantum?
Yeah, well, so maybe that's also an interesting point on the university. So I think the universities, they have a really difficult role right now, at least from my understanding when I talk to people, right? Because on the one hand, you have this whole trend of quantum technology. So everyone is talking about it. Politicians are talking about it. So there's a lot of interest on that. And everyone is expecting, like, you have to do something. We have to get the talents out there, right? So universities now have to create these dedicated programs on quantum technologies, like quantum technology master, quantum computing, quantum information theory, things like this. On the other hand, when we look at the commercial space right now, we have a lot of startups here. There are a couple of big players who are heavily investing into that globally.
Mhm.
But then it's like this job market, and I mean, you know it probably better than I do because you're talking with these companies on a daily basis. But it is developing, right?
Yeah.
Which is positive. There's a positive trend, but there's also not at this point yet an unlimited request for talent. So it's a hard way to, or it's a hard thing to balance both of this. And there's a high chance that things can go wrong, right? Like either you promise too much and you are too early, and then you put people out on the market and there's no request maybe.
Yeah.
That would be the bad side, or the other side, and we hope that this is the more likely one, right? You start to train people, but people are like, not sure if there's going to be something. I'd rather go with something that is, let's say, less specialized and more general.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we are lacking those talents. So that's like the hard thing to balance here.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying I think it's very hard for the universities to make, let's say, a good decision there on how to put it out and how to get people into that. So for us now, as an external side of things, we are in the lucky position that we can also help people that maybe come from a very traditional career
Hmm.
and try to get them towards quantum. And there's like, I mean, we don't have any, at this point at least, we don't have any certificates or anything that might
Yeah.
change in the future. But for now, it's like everyone who wants to learn about it, it's open, it's out there, you can learn about it. Maybe there's also some workshop coming where you can actually request if you like if you're in a company and you want to have a team of people learn more about, I don't know, quantum algorithms in the AI space.
Hmm.
Okay, then you could do a workshop, but then it's more like professional, continuous education. And I
Yeah.
think this is also something very important. By the way, there's also like brain studies and so on that like continuous learning is a very important thing. So we should always keep engaged and learn about new stuff.
100%. Yeah. I think one of the problems that universities have right now is they're trying to plan courses or decipher the future, and these courses can be 3 years long,
Mhm.
3 years long, but we don't know what what it's going to look like in 3 years. So it's really hard to predict, and then get people to buy into this course with no necessary an outcome in 3 years' time. So it's quite tricky.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So
So
I
for
think
me,
people need
for
to be fluid.
example, when I was sitting in that lecture like more than 10 years ago, where
Yeah.
this professor was freshly moving to Aachen University, Hendrik Blum is his name. He was like before in Harvard, he had worked on that. He came to our lecture and he talked about the fact that he's now going to build this lab and create the first qubits, quantum bits there, right? It was super exciting. And then I started working in the lab. And actually we had like so I was in the subgroup that was looking into silicon spin qubits. And back then we had a system with 2 qubits. And it was so exciting because now with 2 qubits, you can do entanglement and
Hmm.
superposition experiments. You have 2 cells that you can read out. And of course, that's like a whole nother story than what we have today with like basically systems that are 2 orders of magnitude more in qubits that you can use. And with that, also the challenges have completely changed, right? Like cooling down a chip with 2 qubits is comparatively easy.
Hmm.
But if you have 200 and you need to get all of these signal lines down in the cryostat, suddenly the heat loads are much different and you still need to be at these low temperatures. So suddenly you have this whole challenge of the signal processing. You might move some of the signal processing down to the cryogenic temperatures. You might have to actually use multiple cryostats, but then figure out how to actually connect those in a quantum way so that they can actually work together, those chips. So that will be or is already becoming a whole nother story of,
Sure.
or a whole nother types of challenges than what we looked back then, like 10 years ago at. So yes, for sure, there's a lot of things happening, and it's very, very difficult to actually figure out what will be the challenges in 5 years from now.
Which is interesting. It's something was going to ask you. So perfect segue. Are there any quantum projects or innovations right now that are driving your approach to digital learning?
Well, I mean, on the quantum side of things, there's a couple of things which I think are interesting. I mean, already a while ago, the companies were moving their computers, the quantum computers, into the cloud, which I think is super interesting for education, at least for physicists and maybe also for computer scientists. But then, for example, if you look at, I don't know, if you look at the more traditional field or like younger students that might be interested in it, it's very abstract because you send data somewhere, it happens in the browser or maybe even via an API interface. So very recently, like a couple of weeks ago, I got to see a system from SpinQ. That's like a company that makes, well, part of their offering is a small quantum computer, which you can put on a table. There's some debate if this is called a quantum computer or not.
Hmm.
I don't want to dive into the details,
Yeah.
but the long story short is you can do some stuff with it. Like there's a screen on it, you can press it, you can run some stuff on it, you can open it and see what is inside. You have these magnets, and there's this little vial with some liquid in it, which has like the quantum states, which you're manipulating with signals. So, and I think just having this physical object, to come back to this whole story of democratization and approachability,
Yeah.
is already again another attracting thing, because some people, they want to see something, they want to touch something, and
Yeah.
that that only such a system can offer you. So I think there's a lot of stuff happening. There's like also on the quantum sensing side of things, there are like experiments where you can build quantum sensors yourself. So yes, I think there's a lot of interesting innovations also from an educational point of view that are happening right now and which we can actually start utilizing. Of course,
Yeah.
there's like this whole nother story about AI and what AI does with education and language models.
Well, that's something you did mention, and I was going to come into that. So yeah, please, let's go down that rabbit hole.
Sure. I mean, language, so AI is not a new invention, right? So it's basically, so maybe I personally oftentimes prefer to say machine learning, because for me, AI for a long time used to be the thing that you write on the PowerPoint slide. So essentially, the idea is already there since a while, but really it started to take off with this whole publication of ChatGPT and the
Yeah.
language models, right? I think it is a very interesting tool. There's a lot of things happening around it.
Yeah.
I'm also very excited to learn more of how to use it in the context of education. So I, for example, have supervised a student already, maybe probably more than 2 years ago already. No, maybe 1.5, where we started to work on a project. So always project-based learning. And we used ChatGPT as a help for the coding, but also as an exploratory instrument to figure out things like, how do we do that? How do we realize that? And I found it incredibly interesting because you can really see how it boosts the learning experience, how things that sometimes take forever and are really just annoying somehow work much faster. However, on the other side, and this is like something where there's like the first research being published right now, in not even peer reviewed yet. This is like very early stage, where people are looking at, okay, if you have, for example, to write an essay and you use
Hmm.
ChatGPT for that, what does it actually do with your brain and your brain activity? And how much do you actually learn about it? And
Yeah.
it turns out that depending on how you use it, it's actually incredibly bad for the learning experience, because it basically serves the fact that you don't really identify with what is written down there anymore. You don't really, because you only read it, you don't interact with the materials.
Hmm.
There is some there are some key elements of learning missing in that.
Hmm.
And there's always this balance. And I think it's right now we are very early. As
Hmm.
always, when it comes to new media, there's a lot of new chances. Like you can, I don't know, use TikTok to create quantum learning stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can also end up in a doom scroll on TikTok where you just scroll one 10-second video after the other for hours and hours, and you don't really, like, your brain doesn't even take anything away from it. So there's
Completely.
always this there's always this balance. And I think the same thing is true with, well, there are always these different sides, and the same thing is true for this whole AI or ChatGPT or language models.
Mhm.
I mean, technically, there's also much more than language models, right? For example, we are also using a AI avatar to create these short videos, which we put out there.
Yeah.
So that, of course, boosts also the productivity on how we create all of those
Yeah.
media. And of course, like the artwork around is also partially being done with AI techniques where we use generative AI approaches to generate this look and feel of the school of quantum. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there,
Yeah.
but we have to somehow start to understand how to use it for learning,
Crazy, because
because
I
there's a chance we get it wrong.
literally had a question here, which I was going to say.
Mhm.
Obviously, you've mentioned large language models like ChatGPT and sector learning. What's the future potential in university or corporate training? And you just literally answered that, so that's fantastic. The one thing I think about, the doom scrolling is terrible, by the way. The other day, it's when you don't want to do something, or you
Mhm.
haven't got the motivation or discipline. You kind of sit there and this, and before
Yes.
you know it, 3 hours have gone. You're like, oh god, the day's gone now. I'm gonna have to do it tomorrow. But I think, I mean, it's Pandora's box. That box is open now. So there are lots of, is it killing brain power? Is it changing, ruining our ability to learn or whatever? It's too late. We're there.
Mhm.
So we have to accept that. And as these models get more and more powerful, we're going to give them more and more control. So we've got to accept that, yeah, the way we learn, the way we do things has changed and has changed forever. But then everything moves forward. But so when it comes to the reports, oh yeah, it's killing brain power, etc. Fine, but let's figure out a way of using it in a constructive manner. I mean, I'm using them all the time, and it saves me a heck of a lot of time. But I think using it as a tool, an add-on, rather than an answer, is the
Mhm.
way. But then each to their own.
Yeah, and I think it can be incredibly good at, let's say, being a place where you can interact with knowledge, because all that knowledge is somehow stored in this language model, right?
Yeah,
And now you can suddenly, not like as in a book, it's not like a streaming medium where you only get input, but you can really start interact with it, ask it questions, try to figure out certain aspects. And also, I mean, that's what everyone is telling, never just trust the language model. You also have other media which you look at. But actually, I think, like, for the young people, that's anyways clear. Like the times where we open a piece of media, look at it, and fully
100%.
believe what it tells us are
Yeah,
over. Like,
yeah.
if there
There's
is
a bias in
something,
everything.
yeah, like, I don't know, if my phone is broken and I want to repair it, then I will not just look at the first video on YouTube and then just start doing it, but
Yeah.
I might look at 2 or 3 videos and compare, okay, did they do roughly the same thing? And then I start doing it, right? And I think that's like already something that we've learned, and this is something that we can also apply to the
Yeah.
language model. So
Tell you what's
we can
crazy.
always
I
cross
used
check.
ChatGPT today. My Mac, which is only a year old, basically slowed down, and it said I had 40 gig of memory left, and my system data was 100 and something or other. And I was sitting there
Hmm.
going, "Oh crikey, what's this?" Well, blah 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 blah, trying to figure it out. And I literally just put it into ChatGPT, and it said, "Okay, you need to do this, check that. Go into terminal, copy this, paste it in, copy what it comes up, paste it into ChatGPT, and I'll tell you what to do next." And within 15 minutes, I'd brought that system data down to 20 gig, and my system was running. So that's the crazy potential of that. Before that, I'd have to go to the Apple Genius Bar or ring them up and go,
Hmm.
"My system is, as we say in England, knackered. Can you help me?"
Hmm.
But I was able to fix that problem myself within 15 minutes, which is
It's
crazy,
crazy, right?
honestly.
But then on the other hand, I mean, that's also regarding the quantum world. That also means in our job market, like, certain things that used to be
Yeah,
possible as a profession, they might not anymore be, and
yeah,
we need to also learn some new stuff. And I mean, everything. So ChatGPT or generally language models, I think they're incredibly well at picking knowledge that is somehow already in the system. And I
Yeah.
think they're also incredibly good at interpolating between existing knowledge points. Like, I don't know, you could say something like, tell me who is the Houdini of cooking. And then it's like, okay, Houdini, okay, I understand. And then it comes up with something that might even be reasonable. So
Yeah.
there it is incredibly well at interpolating between existing knowledge points. Yet where it is not so good is, at least for now, that might also change in the future. There are some very interesting approaches on evolutionary AI and so on. But for now, I think it's not so good at extrapolating stuff that is outside the point cloud. So if you ask it about some stuff that really goes into like cutting edge research on quantum, it might not really be able to answer that because
Yeah.
there's not so much statistically, there's not so much knowledge inside this cloud.
Yeah, it's real time information, isn't it? So I remember
Hmm.
even up to 8 months ago, it's like the information that the model is using is based up until December 2024. So anything that's
Hmm.
happened since then, it's not aware of. So that's the speed of learning. So that's interesting, but that's only going to get quicker.
Yes. So, I mean, technically, there's this idea of RAG,
Mm,
retrieval augmented generation, where you hook the thing up to the internet. And I mean, we see that there's like this deep search function now, where it basically goes out and searches on the internet for something. It
yeah,
uses, for example, I think Gemini will use Google. Others might use other
yeah.
search services. And it
Other search
searches for
services are
stuff.
available, as they say.
Exactly. And then it will pull in that knowledge and use it to generate an answer. But still, like what that's all existing knowledge, which is already somehow out there. It
Yeah,
doesn't invent new stuff.
yeah,
It doesn't, I think it's still hard for it to come up with things that are very like fully outside of our existing knowledge. But again, that might change. There's some interesting research in that area as well.
yeah, yeah. That's a rabbit hole. We could talk about this for ages. I
For
literally
sure.
listened to a podcast by Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett, and there's Mo
Hmm.
Goak, who was, I think it was DeepMind, and he was literally, by the time I finished, I was like, oh God. He's like, basically, all the jobs are going to go, the 1% are going to get
Uh,
richer, everybody's going to be on universal income, you're not going to be able to afford to go anywhere. And I was like, oh, come on. Come on. Just give it a break, It's doom and gloom enough. But anyway, okay. So back to the School of Quantum. Um,
yes.
so which is great. What's your vision for the next 12 to 18 months for Polarstern Education?
Well, I mean, let's say for the School of Quantum, I think we wanna make this knowledge even more accessible. We want to enable people to learn about it.
Hmm.
I think it's like I don't want to. Well, I mean, let's put it into a number. I think it would be great if we could reach 100,000 people out there in the world and make
Fantastic.
them learn something about quantum technology, be able to make informed decisions on, I don't know, whether to invest into quantum companies or not, whether this is actually going to be a thing or not, if it's important for the country, for the company, whatever to look into it or not. So rather than just following some media and somebody who's saying something about it, make up their own minds and learn about it themselves.
See, either you're psychic or these questions are very good. But literally, my next question was going to be: when you look ahead, what impact do you hope your work will have on the next generation of learners? But you kind of just answered that.
There you go. Yeah.
There you
So
go.
I think that.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, obviously, I know you're pushed for time and it's getting late there in Germany now. So, to close, I suppose, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting their journey in quantum or digital learning?
Well, I think it's so always keep your eyes open, play around with new stuff, also language models
Mm,
and whatever is out there. Play around with the quantum computers that are in the cloud and see if it is something that is triggering your interest. I think getting your hands on, starting to work on stuff and playing around with it is always the best way to see if there is like some passion, some interest for a specific topic. And then I think you just follow your interest and go along with it.
fantastic. So, obviously, we kind of talked about collaborations just then. In terms of collaborating with Polarstern Education, obviously, this is all about getting the message out there. How can people contact you or get involved?
Well, I mean, very easy. I'm on social media, so you can reach me on LinkedIn. We have a YouTube channel, a TikTok channel. We are on Instagram. We have a website. There's always ways to kind of reach out to us, to
Yeah.
contact us. And as I said, we are very much open. We work with individuals, with institutions on very different projects. Like some of them are very deep down into, like, I don't know, thinking about quantum algorithms. Some of them are very much on the high level side of, like, I don't know, how can you make an exhibition piece that you can take to a trade show to represent what you're doing?
Yeah.
So very different things.
What are the names, or I was going to say handle, for TikTok, Instagram, etc.? How would they find you?
It's all School of Quantum.
At School of Quantum.
School of Quantum,
School of
just School
Quantum.
of Quantum.
All one
Yes.
word.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, funnily enough, I have another business called QAI Coaching, so we should talk more about that at another time.
For sure. For sure.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Beyond the Bit. A huge thank you, Jonas, for joining me and sharing your journey and insights into quantum education. Wish you all the best, and let's catch up again in 6 months' time and have another chat.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm looking forward for the next chat then.
Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Great to see you again. Bye-bye. And that's a wrap on today's quantum adventure. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, share it with a fellow quantum enthusiast, and leave us a review. It helps us reach much more curious minds. If you have any questions or feedback, please reach out at beyondthebit.quantum@gmail.com. Stay tuned for more exciting explorations into the world of quantum careers. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Until then, keep exploring the quantum possibilities.